Hey guys, today for session 2, we are going to talk about gender roles and how gender and the family is interrelated. Just as a reminder, this lecture does not take the place of reading your textbook. So if you have not done that, go ahead and pause me and get that reading done. Also, please make sure that you have your session 2 notes pulled up and that you are ready to type as I hit the high points of the items that we read this week. So we are first going to begin with our review of those 3 main theoretical paradigms in sociology. Those 3 are structural functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism. And hopefully you remember some of that from last week. You will see that I always use these 3 photos to kind of help us remember the roles that each one of these theories play in our sociological views. So when we look at gender in regards to the theory of structural functionalism, we see that gender roles have changed over time. So prior to the industrial era, we look at the old way, I guess, of living, where the men were doing the hunting, the gathering, the providing for their family. They did the building of the homes. They led their family unit, whereas the women were more of in the domestic roles in the home place. So they tended the garden, and they did the home-based type chores. And those roles actually had a structural function. Okay, those roles went along with the male strength, because we know that the bodies are created differently. Men's body and build is created for strength, and so the roles that the males played were because of the function of their body. And then obviously women are the ones that can bear children, and so that is where their role kind of stemmed from, that staying around the home place, the domestic duties of pregnancy and nursing and child rearing. And yes, some of this is dysfunctional. Some of this can be viewed as negative. However, these were very established and passed down from generation to generation. But we also see that this structure and this function can change very rapidly when society changes. And so we saw that in that World War II era, where so many men were off at war and the females had to step in and fulfill some of the roles that the men were previously fulfilling. That was something that we saw women enter the workforce and become the primary income gatherers for their families. And then we also saw that there was a really tough time of readjustment when the men came back home, because the expectation was that we would be returning back to men being the breadwinners and leaders of the family, and the women returning back to the domestic side. If we look at conflict theory and how that relates to gender and gender roles, conflict theorists will say that men and women are in a constant struggle for power and for resources. And they also explain that the reason why there is conflict is because men are the dominant ones in society, and that women are expected to be subordinate to those men. And this creates exploitation, it creates oppression, it creates inequality between the 2 genders. And as a reminder from last week, you know, we see conflict theory and we say that whoever is the group that is in power has the most resources and is able to create rules and laws for society. And so conflict theory look at this and say this is where men and women struggle. There is reasons for this because women were typically economically dependent upon their husbands in the past, but we have seen some change in that. You know, we've seen the marriage rate decline. We have seen the income level of women increase, and so that has changed some of the traditional outlook of the struggle between men and women. However, a lot of research is still being conducted on the what they call the domestic burden or the second shift of women, and that is the unequal distribution of the role in the home. So sometimes you'll hear people refer to that as the woman's second shift. So she goes to work for a typical 8-hour day, and then she comes home and she has another shift when she gets home of cooking and cleaning and child rearing. And finally, if we look at gender roles and how they relate to symbolic interactionism, basically we see the term gender kind of stand out here. So symbolic interactionism, again, is something that we look at as far as symbols in our environment and how that makes us think about certain things or feel about certain things. And so when we talk about gender, we say we do gender, and we're going to get into that in just a second about what the term gender truly means. But gender is something that is socially constructed. So it's symbols that relay a male or a female version. And so we think about that. We think about jobs, especially. You think about if I said, what does a teacher look like, or what does a nurse look like? Typically, what you're going to think of is a female. If I ask you what a construction worker looks like, or what a truck driver looks like, you're going to go automatically to the male version of that. A lot of times we think about activities that people do. So a football player versus a ballerina. Clothing is something very easy. A lot of times it is easy to distinguish what part of the story you're in based upon the clothing that you're looking at right now. We categorize personality traits. We categorize emotions and how people act, perform, and the things that they do based upon gender. And we have socially constructed these ideas. It's not right. It's not wrong. I'm just explaining how the term gender is socially constructed. So in your notes, I want you to just pause for a moment and think about the three theories that I've just reviewed, and think about how that that impacts you. So which of those three theories do you most identify with when it comes to gender? Which one of those do you most agree with? All right, so we are moving into gender and the family. So thinking about that essential question for today, how is gender and family related? And remember, last week we talked about the function of the family. And so we remembered that the family functions to provide care, emotional stability, provides support, regulation, and control. Okay, and so this week we're going to kind of look at the social accountability for families and the expectations that families teach gender. This is the primary place that children are taught how to act, what to do, what hobbies to take up, what to wear, what to say. And so those stereotypes are taught through either spoken or unspoken family aspects. And parents are the most influential, and parents could be very fluid. So if you're in a family where you're not raised by an actual biological parent, whoever is that parent feature in that family is the most influential. And we see that children model behaviors within their family unit. So this is where children learn gender. All right, so this is a difficult topic for a lot of people to grasp because there is so much controversy between sex and gender, and in our society we use these terms kind of interchangeably, but in fact they are not interchangeable if you look right at the actual definition. And so the term sex is something that is biology based. So this is based upon biological factors, right? So what chromosomes are in your DNA determine your sex. What type of hormones are in your body determines your sex. Your sex organs, internal and external genitalia, determine your sex, and that is not something you can fight on, right? Because there's either an X or a Y, and that's just what it is. So the term sex is kind of stationary, goes along with biology. The term gender is what we're going to talk about, is much more constructed. All right, so this is social and psychological. All right, so these are learned behaviors, learned beliefs, learned values, learned attitudes. Gender is what is taught in that family unit. So these are the things where we expect females to wear dresses and men to wear pants. Okay, that is not something that we're biologically born to do. It is something that society has created for us. Again, this sex versus gender is something that is very controversial. And so it is important that we understand the terminology and we understand what word goes with what we're meaning, especially in our writing. Okay, so if we talk about gender identity, so there is a lot of again, controversy on what people identify as, and that's why it's so important to kind of understand the background of sex versus gender. So gender identity is another one of those psychological social terms. Okay, so it is not something that we're born with, it is something that we learn. So that is that psychological state of what I view myself as. So you're either a male, you're a female, and then we have recently added in terms of agender or gender fluid. So agender would be someone that does not identify as having a gender identity. So they don't view themselves as a male and they don't view themselves as a female. They view themselves as neither. And then gender fluid is a vocabulary term that explains how someone's conceptions of what they are and how they feel change. And so they may feel female one day and they may feel male another day. Now remember, this is the term gender, and so this is psychologically or socially done. This does not have anything to do with the sex side, the biological side of the body. Okay, and when we talk about gender roles in society or in a family, we are talking about the social norms. So what a family has determined or what society has determined appropriate for females to do or males to do. When we talk about that in terms of the family, we obviously talk about what is a male expected to do within a family, what is a female expected to do within a family. And the gender role ideology there is those relationships between men and women in society. And if we look at it from a traditional standpoint or an egalitarian standpoint, those traditional roles is the men as the provider of income, works outside of the home, women as the domestic person that works inside of the home, raises the children, cooks the meals, those kinds of things. So traditional and egalitarian is a word that you will see pop up in many more lectures and videos along the way.